Today, let's dive into storytelling. I'm so excited to bring a very special guest whom I've actually just recently met. So, this is going to be a really interesting conversation around storytelling and the power of us really getting vulnerable, diving into what our stories are, what they look like, what are the myths, what are the limiting beliefs people have around storytelling, and how your story can actually help you sell more and be more successful in your business. Create more clients, students, whatever it is you're looking for. So we have the amazing Kam Snow here with us today. What's going on, Kam?
Not much. Excited to be here talking with you.
Yeah. So why don't we just start off with you sharing your story? That seems pretty relevant for what we're talking about today, and let people get to
Yeah,
know who you are, and we'll go from there.
yeah, for sure. So my name is Cam, formerly Cameron. I chopped off the ERON during the pandemic. And kind of like when I'm talking about like story, it's always interesting on like where I start the story. And this is like a lesson as I do this that I can tell you my personal why, or I can tell you like how I got here. And so I'm going to share with you like how I got to this point in time at this moment. Because what I do is I help people extract and tell their stories. And 2 years ago in 2019, I had reached this point in my career where I was like, it's time for me to go out on my own. I'm going to go and be my own business owner. I had worked as a professional copywriter for a guy named Scott Oldford for 3 years. And during that time had written about $10 million worth of copy, written for some other influencers like Sunny Leonard Doozy, wrote for ClickFunnels, didn't enjoy it. Couple of other influencers in there. And in that process, I'm like, all right, it's time for me to go out on my own. And I had been copywriting for people, doing marketing strategy. And when I opened my mouth to speak, nothing came out when it was for me. And that kind of created this sense of panic inside of me that was pretty debilitating. And it was symptomatic of some other things that were going on. But up until August of 2020, I was just searching for like, what is that thing that I need to do? What is the higher level of service that I know that I can give, but I just don't have the words for it. I don't have the message for it. I don't know what my story is. How am I supposed to tell my story in a way that relates to other people? Because I don't even know what it is. And it was during that summer of 2020, I hired a coach who was the one person that I had met who I trusted and I felt like could do something similar to what I did for other people. And he helped me kind of figure out that a lot of my story has been around voicelessness and not feeling like I had the ability to own my voice or to be able to speak. And I looked back and I realized that I had built my political career around speaking other people's words. And I had been a ghost copywriter for other people because they never put that credibility into my own voice. And so as I kind of moved through this process, a number of things happened that created the space for the story economy to come through. One of them being that I had to let go of some relationships and there was some personal stuff that needed to happen, which is really relevant because when you're doing story, it's not just business, like it's everything in your life. So what ended up happening is I came up with this idea, the story economy, because I'd realized that looking back, I had always basically told 7 different kinds of stories when I was a copywriter. And that formed what is now the story economy, which is the 7 stories that any strategist needs to sell out their offers in a way that's authentic and brings in aligned clients.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my story.
That's powerful. And I think that just is a testament to your mess being your message. A lot of times it's easier to coach a client and it's easier to, tell someone else about their thing. But when we look at us, we're like, okay, wait, how do I do this for me? I think a lot of people can relate to that. And knowing that actually the fact that you feel voiceless, that's actually your story. And I think so many people can connect to that. And I love that you're sharing it from such a relevant time of like, this was recent. This was just like within the past year. So
Mm-hmm.
do you find that a lot of people have a hard time sharing story because it brings about that vulnerability, or they feel like they won't be looked at as an influencer or as the expert or as the go-to in their niche?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the vulnerability piece of like, if you're going to share your story, then you are going to have to go into places that are uncomfortable for you. And you're either going to step into that and just open yourself up to it, or you're going to resist it the whole way. And when you resist sharing your story, because that's actually what you want to do.
Yeah.
You actually want to open up and be able to share the message that you really have for your audience. But when you're like running into it and when there's not a lot of story there and not a lot of story that's showing up in your content, it's symptomatic of something else, which is look at me, but don't see me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want you to like really see what this is because there's something about it that I don't want you to see.
Yeah.
And if you're going to push into that space of sharing story, like you are going to have to work through that. And there is a healing that has to occur in order for that to be effective. So absolutely, like it's almost one and the same. Sharing your story and vulnerability, they have to go hand in hand. And like I've had so many stories of like the super vulnerable stuff that I'm sure we'll get into as we continue to proceed through this conversation. But that story that I actually shared with you, that I just told, and I sent you the Facebook post before we got on here. That was a weird experience for me because my first thought was, oh my gosh, what are my political friends going to think? Because I talked about my experience in politics.
Yeah.
I was like, why do I care about that?
Yeah.
It's like it was an oddly vulnerable post because it was like, hey, this person that everybody else thought I was, like I'm actually not that person. I'm actually this person. And like this is the real me. And like that can shake some people, which is why we tend to not want to share.
And a lot of times too, the stories, when I think of story, I think of, well, I'm going to tell a story from past, so it brings up a lot of past, which can bring up pain, which can bring up the hard, like it's reminding you of something. But it's kind of a beautiful thing because it allows that story to not define you. It allows it to, when it's brought to the light, it can actually like go away. Is there something that you find as you tell your stories, like you release a lot of your limiting beliefs or hangups or things that hold you back?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Like the process that we bring people through in terms of actually getting the story economy into your business is we call it connecting the dots of your story. And the dots are discovering your story, owning it, telling it, and selling with it. And in that process, kind of at every point, we build in healing. And it's a part of the process, but we're also intentional about that because you can't actually own your story. After you discover it, you can't actually own it until you've healed from it.
Yeah.
And so much of the limitations that you have around yourself, or the things that you don't even know are a problem, like the you think that you're at a 10 out of 10 on your confidence, and then you go through this process and realize you're like, actually I was at a 3. And you realize that there's so much more that's possible when you go through and actually heal those stories that you don't even know are showing up. But it will show up when you are at a growth point where you're like, I've achieved this level and now I want to get to the next level. And it's like you want to leap, but your body is planted and you're like, I can't move and I don't understand what's happening. It feels like you lose your voice in the process of being able to speak and share content. And it's because there's something from your past, from your story, that is telling you that it is unsafe for you to step into that next level.
Yeah. And I know it's so powerful because I was just sharing with you before we went live here, like I'm getting ready and I'm like, I don't tell a ton of stories. I do in my, like when I'm writing emails to my list, I share a little more story there. And do you find that it's easier to share story in certain areas rather than others? Or, what's your take on that? Because I know with social media, I find like, okay, how do I handle Facebook these days and versus Instagram, where it's a lot more tips and infographics and that kind of thing. Do you find that stories jive or gel in certain areas better than others?
I would say that universally, like stories are always the thing that is moving the conversation.
Yeah.
It's a timeless tradition of like our species
Yeah.
of like sharing information and wisdom through storytelling. And so in terms of like how that's presented on different platforms, there certainly are nuances. What
Mhm.
I do find is that somebody can, in some measure, share their story on a live stream because they know that very few people might see it because it's kind of buried in the middle of your live
Yeah.
stream. And a lot of people will have resistance to actually writing the story, which is why we first focus on like writing out the story and being able to share it that way, and then like repurpose that into live streams, repurpose that into other kinds of content. But there is something that has to happen, because when you write it and you see it physically for the first time, it changes your relationship to the story, and a lot
Yeah.
of the healing is in that process.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I love that. So, what would you say would be some great best practices to getting started and putting yourself out there? Because a lot of times when we say write stories, people initially go, "Well, I don't. What am I
Hmm.
write about? Like, I don't have a story. Like, their story is they don't have one."
Hmm.
So, what would you say would be like the best way to just start storytelling?
I mean, like my first super tangible suggestion is to download our guide
Yeah, go for it.
on the story economy, which I'll give you the link for that,
Yeah,
and you can have it in
be
with the
awesome.
links and stuff. Um, but essentially, like what that is we have the story economy process, which is the 7 stories to fill up your offers. But another way to think about it is that it's 7 different ways to tell your story,
Right.
because it's essentially bringing someone from like, this is why I do what I do, which is the first story, all the way into the invitation story, which is like, this is why this matters for you right now to make this leap and invest.
Mhm.
And so like in terms of like where to start, like if you do nothing else, the most powerful stories you can share are always going to be about, this is why I care about what I do, this
Mhm.
is why I care about you as the avatar, this is why, in fact, pretty much all of the stories are based on some version of that. This is why I
Yeah.
care about giving you this offer, this is why I care about helping you overcome this objection, this is why I care about helping you understand that this promotion can actually help you. All of those things, like, just look at what you're selling
Mhm.
and then ask yourself, why do I care about this? Why do I care about selling this? Why do I care about somebody purchasing this? What's in it for me? What's in it for them? Because it's both. You get something out of it when they purchase, because there's a part of you that recognizes the transformation that they're about to go through, because you recognize what it felt like for you when you were going through it. And you have to
Yeah.
be careful of that, because you can go into savior energy and
Mhm.
just try and like save people.
It's
And
challenging, especially as Christians, by the way, because I know we're of the faith, and
super.
it's like sometimes that this community can feel like broken, you know. I
Mm,
recently went to a concert at our church, and it was just I felt like leaving. I was like down and out. I'm like, I don't
mm,
feel broken like this all the time. Can we like lift up and like have that positive vibe? So is that
yes.
is that
Mm,
the difference like with storytelling? Because I think sometimes people mix up like airing dirty laundry with like I
hmm.
don't want to go too far, like how much is too much, or like
Hmm.
to avoid that savior broken kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that line, in terms of like what's appropriate to share, like you will find that line for yourself when you are able to see the connection between your story and the thing that you now sell. When
Hmm.
you're able to see the connection between your story and the clients that you now serve. And that gives you like a compass in some ways, in terms of being able to navigate your story, of like, what is this story for and who is it for? Because when you know who it's for, and you know the power of that story, and you still choose not to share it, at that point, that's mishandling your calling, that's being a poor steward of like the gifts that God gave you, because now you have something that can help someone else, and you're saying, well, I'm not going to share it because I'm worried about what other people may think,
Yeah.
when there are literally people who may read your story and it may contribute to saving their life.
Right.
Like, and we don't think about that, because like, oh, we're selling marketing and sales and we're selling products, but your content, your story is more than that. It's more than the thing that you sell, and people are purchasing from you because they trust you. And
Yeah.
the best way to build that trust is to extend that vulnerability first.
Yeah. So there was an idea that I had. where and I keep forgetting my mom and my dad live a little ways away from me, and I'm like, I want them to bring like old pictures and photos that of
Hmm.
like just me growing up. And I'm all about performance. I'm a performer. Me and my husband are musicians, but I have pictures
Hmm.
from like when I was little. I would dress up in my cousin's skating skirts and have a microphone and like sell tickets in the living room. Just
It's
do
awesome.
all this stuff. Like, do you find like bringing in the personal aspects of your life and documenting is just as powerful as the stories around what you offer?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's actually the first category in the story
Oh,
economy is personal stories. Like we start with the personal why story, which is why do you care about this avatar?
yeah.
And it's not a question around like why do you care about building your business in terms of like I need to make money. It's like we give the medicine that we crave for ourselves.
Hmm.
And we're trying to figure out why is it that I have given this medicine and why do I care about it? And how did I get so good at this thing that I do? And that's more than your offer. That's like expressed in your personality and the experiences that you have. So like for me, when I look at my story and I'm like, I help people essentially like create marketing content. I help people create content that resonates stronger than other kinds of content. It's like, okay, well, where's that in my story? Maybe not content, but when you look at voicelessness, like, because what I really do is I help people own their voice. I
Yeah.
help people unlock their voice. And I look back at my story, I'm like, oh, that's my story.
Yeah. It's like a
That's
mirror.
my story.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's so
And when
interesting.
you can see that, it's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Always looking at like, I always talk about like what you feel on the inside reflects on the outside, and what you see, like if you're triggered or if you're feeling some sort of resentment or resistance towards it, it's like, how is that a mirror for you? It's like such a powerful way to,
Yeah.
yeah, I get to write more stories. I'm really excited. It's
Yeah,
inspiring.
absolutely.
Yeah. So let us know where people can find you. Absolutely. Because I know you have your resource. Do you have
Hmm.
like, do you know the link by heart, or do you want me to just put it in
Oh
the
yeah. Yeah. We've got, so I would say like in terms of getting started with like, how do I wrap my mind around what stories to share? Um, those stories are in our story economy guide, which is
yeah.
bit.ly/story economy guide.
Okay.
And we're also on Facebook. We have our Facebook group, which is the story economy group. And that is bit.ly/story economy group.
Yes. I
And with
love.
that one, I believe it's capital S, capital E, capital G, because Bitly is weird about capitals.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll just put it below, and like I'll make a little banner here. We'll make it all fancy. And so,
Fancy.
Cam, I love this. I love where this conversation is going. And is there any final thoughts or advice for those who are maybe feeling a little hesitant or resistant to this concept of really taking
Mm.
it on? And is there some sort of challenge or way to stretch them into just taking the leap?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing to remember is that your story matters.
Mhm.
That's the number one lie that you're going to encounter as you go through this work is that my story is insignificant, my voice doesn't matter, my story doesn't matter, nobody cares about this. And like none of those things are true. And if you allow that to keep you stuck without sharing, then the people who are meant to find you will never find you because then you sound like everybody else talking about 5 tips to this and 3 tricks
Yes.
to that.
Oh,
And there's nothing that makes you unique about it if you don't share you.
it is so funny that I literally just posted in my community today about like, how are you standing out? How are you unique? How are you showing up and not just regurgitating? Oh, that's so funny that you just said that. How are you not
Hmm.
regurgitating everything? And yeah, and I think it's so awesome that we've been able to collaborate on this video. And uh really looking back on 2020, that's what I wanted to break out of, was like, I'm done with like just sharing tactics and best practices, like what, like finding the root. It sounds like with storytelling, like I'm really big on helping people find the root of what's holding you back, or the root of where
Hmm.
you get to go. And not just diagnosing with medicine, but figuring out, the actual problem. And it
Right.
just sounds like storytelling is such a therapeutic way to do that. So I'm
100%.
really excited to step up my game in the storytelling world. And I hope all of you are watching too. So if you're committed to storytelling and really taking the leap, download the guide, drop in the comments that you're committed. And I'm sure you're going to see more of Kam. Like, I'm excited to connect and collab with you more in some way, shape, or form and learn from you on the power of
Awesome.
storytelling. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, until next time, God bless, keep the faith, impact the world, and we'll see you soon.